Hi, I am your payroll expert, Shannon Ballman Theis. And the disclaimer, just letting everybody know that the information is not intended to be taken as tax planning, financial, or legal advice. Every attempt has been made to present accurate information at the time of this recording on November 25th. I forgot what day it was. I shouldn't have. It's my son's birthday. So every attempt has been made to present accurate information at the time of this recording on November 25th. Tax laws change frequently. Please definitely seek advice from your tax, payroll, and or legal professional before making business decisions. And it's also a really good idea to read the 1099 instructions yourself. And if you don't want to read the 1099 instructions yourself, you can watch some of my YouTube videos. So what we're going to cover today is what is a 1099 form, who needs to fill it out. There's a bunch of different types of 1099s and options for what you put on what form. We're going to also discuss the 1096, which is only needed if you mail returns in, and the Form 945, which is for backup withholdings. Knowing what payments to exclude or include on the 1099 NEC based on the 1099K requirements, what you can do now to make filing easier, and what to do if you have reporting errors. All right, so what is a 1099 and who is it for? There are a lot of common types of 1099s. The most common that we as accountants and bookkeepers run into is the 1099 NEC, 1099 miscellaneous, 1099 INT, and 1099 DIV. And we need to know the rules for the 1099K, even though they're prepared by a payment processor, because that whole payment processor 1099K rules are very complicated and super confusing. And so a 1099 is an informational return sent to people who you have paid a certain type of income to throughout the year. And a 1099 miscellaneous and NEC are used for the following different types of recipients. A contractor who is not a corporation and who has been paid more than $600 in cash or cash equivalent through the year receives a 1099 NEC. A landlord who is not a property management company receives a miscellaneous. Attorney paid more than $600, no matter the entity type, gets a 1099 NEC. The only attorney payments that go on a 1099 miscellaneous are for settlements. And I know that part had me confused a little bit when I first started doing 1099s. I used to put any attorney fee in the attorney settlement box. And then I discovered when I was reading instructions for probably the 5th year in a row that I'd been doing it wrong. And so cropland rent, commercial fishers, and $10 in royalties go on the 1099 miscellaneous. And this is what the different types of forms look like. The most common 1099 forms is the 1099 miscellaneous. This is what we used to use for non-employee compensation until a couple of years ago they reactivated the 1099 NEC that they had stopped using in 1982 because the dates are different for non-employee compensation versus the miscellaneous. So just a quick breakdown of this form. Box 1 is rent, 2 is royalty, 3 is other income, and 4 is if any federal income tax was withheld. 5, fishing boat proceeds. 6, medical and healthcare payments. And 7, line 7 appears on both the miscellaneous and the NEC, but they're different boxes. And all you do if if this box applies is check it. If the pay or made direct sales totaling $5,000 or more of consumer products to the recipient for resale. So this is the only time that you issue a 1099 for products, and you're not reporting anything except for that you did it by checking the box. Substitute payments in lieu of dividends or interest would go in box 8 and not on the 1099 dividend or 1099 interest form. Crop insurance proceeds, gross proceeds paid to an attorney, that would be the settlements. Fish purchased for resale. Section 409 deferrals, excess golden parachute payments. I have never seen that box filled out on any 1099 that I've done or reviewed. Non-qualified deferred compensation. And then if any state taxes or anything were withheld, that would go in boxes 16, 17, and 18. And here's the 1099 NEC. And this is a continuous use form. I forgot to mention it on the 1099 miscellaneous. They leave the last 2 digits of the calendar year blank, and you can use the same form for multiple years, which is nice because if you have a whole bunch and you don't use them before, they would be garbage, and now you can just change. They're good for multiple years. Box 1 is where we put the non-employee compensation in that we're going to discuss all the roles for in the coming slides here. And again, the payer made direct sales totaling 5,000 or more in consumer products to the recipient for resale. You check that box. Box 3 is reserved for future use. 4 is if any federal income tax was withheld. 5, 6, and 7 is for state withholdings. But 1096 is only needed if you're paper filing forms 1097, all the 1098 series, 1099 series, 3921, 3922, 5497, and W2G. You do not use a form 1096 when you transmit electronically. So we're going to spend a minute or two talking about the form 95, which is the annual return of withholding federal income tax. Since contractors receive compensation through non-payroll payments, normally if a business is required to have backup withholdings withheld, those are reported on a form 1095. Okay, so reasons that you would need to complete a form 945 are that backup withholding is required, and some reasons that backup withholding might be required is that the contractor refuses to send a W-9, or they request voluntary backup withholdings to be withheld from their regular invoice payments. A form, and so this is just what the form 945 looks like. You fill out, the top part with the information, and then, how much federal withholdings, and then it wants you to break it down by month down here in this section. Who submits 1099s and when are they due? Who should be submitting a form 1099? So they're business only tattletale forms. So only business owners who pay people, or independent contractors and freelancers, need to submit a 1099, or business owners who pay rent to another business that is not a property manager, businesses who pay attorney fees. And then I broke down 1099s into this, or that I have a chart that shows when the 1099 miscellaneous and 1099 NEC is due. And there's a typo here. When I was updating my slides, I forgot to update it. Last year, January 31st was on the weekend. And so 1099 NECs and miscellaneouses are due to the recipient on January 31st. And the 1099 miscellaneous is due to the government either February 28th if they're mailed or March 31st if they're filed electronically. This is the reason that they reactivated the 1099 NEC is because not only are they due to the recipient on January 31st, they're due to the IRS on January 31st, whether they're mailed or electronically filed. And what was happening before they reactivated this was people would send a 1099 with NEC used to be box 7, but they would send the 1099 to the IRS and with some, 1099 for rent, and all of them would be late because they could only assign one due date to a batch, or only one date to a batch. So if one return in the whole batch was late, they were all late. The last year, the 1099 e-filing requirements changed. So if there is a total of 10 of any of these forms, it is required that they be filed electronically. If somebody has 8 1099s and 3 W-2s, they're required to file electronically. And there's a lot of different e-file options. The most common are Track 1099 and Tax 1099. They both integrate with a lot of accounting software. And I know with Tax 1099, it gives you the option to file with a missing social security number or EIN. You shouldn't file that way, but sometimes it's unavoidable. And so you do need to have a way that you can file if you are missing any of the information. Later, we're going to talk about how to make sure you do have everything ahead of time. There are free ways that you can file 1099s, and that is through FIRE, which requires a transmitter control code. And that's recommended if you have a large volume of forms, like thousands of 1099s. IRIS requires a different transmitter control code from FIRE, and you can submit up to 100 records per upload with a CSV template. All right. I think this is the reason that most everybody is here, is to find out what the rules are for the 1099K and payment processors. So we all know that 1099Ks are for payment processors, which include credit and debit, stored value cards such as gift cards and other payment cards. Payment apps or online marketplaces, also called third-party settlement organizations. What types of payments are considered, credit or debit cards? It's anything that goes through a third-party settlement organization. It can be a little confusing on what gets included and what doesn't get included. I've got another slide that talks about all of that stuff. And 1099Ks are created by payment card companies, payment apps, and other online marketplaces. Anyone who receives payment on your behalf for a fee then sends you money. That's who creates that. So, that is from the recipient point of view, but as the people who create 1099s for our clients, we need to understand what the recipient gets as far as the 1099K, because the last thing that we want to do is include any payments on a 1099 NEC that are also included on a 1099K. I've got a story for that coming up. The IRS does not have any of the 2024 rules for the 1099Ks on their website. I looked right before I presented over this weekend, And the IRS website still had the 2023 requirements of $20,000 and 200 transactions. However, their timeline that they had published previously stated that the thresholds would be gross payments exceeding $5,000 in any number of transactions. A lot of third-party payment softwares will send well below the minimum threshold. I know we've gotten them for, $2,000 or $3,000 before from some of our third-party payment processors. I have a yes, no thought process on, when to include or when to exclude payments from 1099. And I will be sending that out to everybody on my newsletter. If you don't get that, then just send us an email at team@payrollrestoration.com. And I will make sure that you get that thought process there. How do we know what payments we have to exclude? For years, it was always credit and debit card payments. Those were really easy to tell because they were not a check. But now they're getting a little bit harder to know for sure what's a credit or a debit card payment, because sometimes ACHs look like debit card payments on the bank statement. PayPal, but not if it's a PayPal friends and family account. Venmo business, not personal. Cash App is another one that I think Cash App, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on my thought on this, but if Cash App is personal, it would not be included on the 1099K, but only if there's a business Cash App. Some ACH payments might be run through payment rails where the sender puts it on their 1099K. I use Ignition, and Ignition recipients get ACH on their 1099K. I think Stripe does too. A lot of times, without going and looking to see how your recipient received their money, it's going to be almost impossible to know if it's going to be included on a 1099K, because the only way to know that Ignition puts ACH on their 1099K is by looking at their FAQs and going to their website. I Googled, does Ignition put ACH on 1099K? And I came up with a really good article that they had shared saying that they do. Does anybody have questions on that? Because it's a lot to take in. I want to make sure that I'm addressing those questions right away, if anybody has questions on that. Diamond laughed that I called them tattletale forms. I do, because that's what they are. The only reason that we need to prepare 1099s is to tell the government that we paid people money. And because there was a time where people were hiding their income and not reporting all of it. All right. Wendy's got a question.
Okay, I think this is the right place to ask this. So you mentioned PayPal, friends and family. Did you say, was there Venmo? Did it have a personal?
Yeah. So
Okay.
anytime the recipient pays a fee to receive the money, then that is usually run through a payment rail that then reports all that income on a 1099K. There are some exceptions, because like Milio, when when we send money through Milio, even if it's paid for with a credit card, it's not run through payment rail because it's initiated in the accounts payable process. And so those payments don't get included on a 1099-K for the recipient. So that's why I said this 1099-Ks have just gotten insanely
Oh, yeah.
complicated in the last
Well,
5 years.
my question is, and this is not really related to my business. My husband is the scoutmaster of a Boy Scout troop. And, and so obviously they're a nonprofit and they have looked for ways for people to be able to pay fees electronically. And
Are they sending the money, friends and family? Or are
they're
they
not doing it
send,
at all because the committee chair is against it because she says if one person starts accepting all this money, it's like a treasurer starts accepting all this money, they're going to get a 1099 NEC, and she doesn't want that to happen. And I'm like, but as long as it's a, that's what my question is. As long as it's a
no,
personal account,
no. If
is
they
that
currently, if they receive the money and and do it all as friends and family, there will be no 1099 trigger because 1099 is only a bit, it starts with a business transaction.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
they're receiving money on behalf of the organization.
Hmm.
And or I'm sorry, Diamond, do you mind hopping on? Because I think you might know the answer to this. If they do friends and family, it shouldn't trigger any 1099 at all.
So if it's friends and family, then there's no 1099-K. If the business is following the 1099 NEC instructions, then they're only issuing 1099 NECs to recipients of business transactions. So if they're paying
And
for their trade or business.
yeah, so if they're paying Boy Scout fees, there's no business that's happening because it's individuals that are
Hmm.
paying the scout troop. And individuals have zero 1099 requirement.
All right. That's my other question. I'm in a mom's group in Facebook for Northwest Arkansas, and someone asked a question if they needed to give a 1099 to their house cleaner. And of course, there
Yes.
were a
Well,
million
no,
answers,
It
all in
depends.
various
it
states of,
depends.
correction. Yes, that's
It always just
what
depends.
I said. I need more information. I mean, we don't know. But
Do they run their business? Do they run a business out of their house? Or do they just have a house cleaner because they don't want to clean their house and they don't have a business?
I would assume it was just a person paying a house cleaner.
Yep, individuals
Do
have
they have a
zero
rental?
1099.
Do they have any rental property
I
activity?
have no idea. I don't know the person. I just saw the post, and like I said, there was me as a CPA, and I'm like, I mean, I would need to sit down with you and ask a bunch of questions to truly answer this. And other people are saying absolutely yes, and some are saying absolutely not, and some are saying so. That's why I was like, I'll just ask while I'm here.
Yeah, no, it's always it depends, like Diamond
Okay, so
said. But
personal payments
um,
don't. Okay, cool. So
but
then
what
the
but
scout one,
yeah,
like I said, if one person is treasurer and somehow collects, like say through Venmo, people pay them fees. So as long as it's a personal Venmo account, there will be no 1099 triggered.
correct.
Okay. What if they, but I guess the problem would be if the troop as a 501c3 organization tried to set up like a Venmo business account, then that might trigger some 1099 stuff, right?
It might, but it shouldn't. What are
So
your
if
thoughts?
if the treasurer has a Venmo business type account and that's what they're receiving donations to, then Venmo would just assume that it was business transactions because it's a business account and send a 1099-K for that. And then the CPA or enrolled agent, or bless their heart, the DIY person doing their own tax return would have to make adjustments for that 1099
Mhm.
income to make it not taxable if it is truly not taxable.
Okay. Susan says Venmo's tricky. Too many transactions can cause it to be frozen if they think it's a business. Maybe
Yeah,
that's what our committee chair had found out.
possibly. But Joanne had said that Zeffy, Zeffy, is a payment processor that's free for nonprofits.
Oh, say that
So
again. Z.
it's in the chat. It's right above the one that you read, but
Oh,
Zeffy.
Zeffy. I see. Okay. All right. Oh, thank you. I will mention that to them.
And yeah, Joanne says that if they set up a nonprofit Venmo account, they won't have to pay fees. However, they can't send any payments. If they set up a business account, then they'll pay Venmo fees.
Okay.
So ideas on receiving the payment.
But then they wouldn't be able to transfer the money out of there? Is that what send any payments means?
No, so I think with Venmo, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't use any of these, but I think that you can send payments through Venmo to, you don't just receive payments, you can send
Right.
payments.
Right.
But with the nonprofit Venmo account, you can receive payments only. You can't
Oh,
pay anything with it. So you can't like refund a Venmo.
got it. Got it. Okay. But it would go to your nonprofit checking account and you
Yes.
could always refund them, like just write them a check if you needed to refund it that way.
Yep.
Okay.
And thank you, Diamond, for putting a help article for Venmo in the chat here.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, that's what I wanted to know. I figured while we're on this subject, I would, like I said, it's not related to my business, but being my husband's a scoutmaster, we're all trying to find ways to not have to collect cash, you know?
Right. Right. And there's so many different electronic money moving tools available. But at the same time, you do have to play in the Scoutmaster's realm, so to speak,
Mhm.
where they set the rules. Um,
Right.
and worst case scenario, a 1099 comes into the individual. There's there's tax tricks to get that stuff moved. I had to do that because all of my money one year came through Ignition ACH, and I had a bunch of clients who were being super helpful, and they sent me a 1099 NEC, and I was able to get most of them to send me a corrected one, zeroing out the revenue. However, I still had about a quarter of my revenue that was being double reported. So then what we did is we just increased my revenue so that I didn't get a letter from the IRS saying that I underreported. And then we just added an expense called duplicate 1099 reporting, or I forget what she did. Um, but however much my revenue had to increase to account for the duplicate 1099s that I got, I just increased my expenses by that amount. So the net effect was the same, but it stopped getting an underreporting of my income penalty and notice from the IRS.
Mhm.
So
We used to do that. I used to do tax returns, in a CPA's office. And so I know you can do that. And to me, I'm like, so just put on there, an expense and zero it out. But not everybody feels that way. They get a 1099 and they freak out. So, you know, all right.
I know
Thanks.
I wasn't worried about it. I was just annoyed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I
And
mean, it's still a pain. You still have to deal with it, but still. So, all right. Thank y'all.
yep. Thank you, Diamond, for putting all those links. She found Zeffy, and it looks like there's a warning on Zeffy. All right, so we're gonna move on to the next section here. What can you do to make 1099s filing easier in January. I start this process usually the end of October or the beginning of November, where in the accounting software, I will review the vendor and contractor payments. What I do is I pull a vendor detail report, not the summary report, because I want to take a look at each transaction and see, if it's noted that it's like a credit card or a debit card or ACH, because sometimes, and I always pull it with the bank feed notes so I can see how the recipient received their money. Because sometimes that excludes different lines. It's kind of a tedious process. And so that's why I get the bulk of it over at the beginning of Q4. And then there's a lot less to review in January or the end of December. And then that's a good time to review who needs to get a 1099 and who do we not have a W-9 for? And then you can start the process of collecting W-9s either through your secure portal, or you can use a service to manage W-9s like Track 1099, Keeper. I know there's a ton of other W-9 tracking softwares out there. And the beauty is the people will fill out their information and it's less likely to be incorrect. You always want to take a look at the W-9s to make sure they're correctly filled out. I have a whole video that talks about how to correctly fill out a W-9. You're not verifying that the information they provide is correct, but you're verifying that, if they checked individual sole proprietor, that they filled out both lines 1 and 2. And if they're any other type of entity, most likely they only need to fill out line 1, because the line 1 has to match the tax return. And if it's a Schedule C, line 1 is your name. And the second line would be the name of your business. But if you're an S Corp or a partnership, line 1 is your business because that's who files the tax return. What to do if you have reporting errors? You want to reach, as soon as you get a 1099 and it's not correct, you want to reach out to the business that issued it incorrectly and ask them to correct the error. And sometimes if an error is caught early enough, the business can issue a corrected 1099 prior to sending the incorrect 1099 to the IRS. But if you do have to correct a 1099 that was already sent to the IRS, then it's the exact same form, only you mark the corrected box at the top. And that's all you have to do. And which seems really odd, especially for somebody like myself who's always, you've got previously reported and corrected information on all of the payroll returns, except for the 940. But to correct a 1099 that was already sent to the IRS, you click that corrected box at the top and just put the correct information on the return. Usually around October, the IRS sends out their CPA 2100 or CPA 2100As. And these are the notices that tell you that the taxpayer name and taxpayer identification number don't match the IRS records, or that it was not supplied, completely missing. And like I said before, on the W-9, you want to make sure that if they've marked just that they're a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, you will be needing both their personal name and their business name. What you need to do is you need to compare the payee records to the notice. If the notice and the records match and the W-9 appears to be filled out correct, send the appropriate B notice to the payee. And that's just a notice saying, The B notice is a notice to the payee saying that you've received a letter from the IRS and you request that they fill out a new W-9. And if it's obvious that the TIN is incorrect, then you need to begin backup withholdings immediately. Or like if it's missing, anytime you don't have a W-9, you need to do backup withholdings, which is also a wonderful tool that you have in your toolbox that allows you to get a W-9 from a business owner who hasn't provided one to you, because they'll notice if they're missing 29 or 27% of their invoice. And what you should never do when you get a CP 2100 is call or write to the IRS saying that you've corrected your records, because they don't care. And they don't have the manpower to deal with that. So I do have a special offer for those attending this presentation live. I have a payroll mastermind where I go live every week on Facebook. It's the same Zoom link, and we go live on Zoom since I've been having issues going live directly to Facebook in my groups. And then you get the Black Friday deal is you get the VIP access, which is normally $97 a month free for the rest of 2024. The first time you would be billed for it is when you renew in January. And with the VIP membership, you get one-on-one calls with me every month. If a vendor does not provide social or ERN, how do we proceed? Also, what if that vendor is international? Ooh, Carla, those are great questions. If the vendor doesn't provide their social or their EIN on the W-9, then you will want to withhold their backup withholding. And I've never yet had to submit backup withholdings to the IRS and report them on a 945. But if they refuse to provide something, then that is always the best option of what you want to do. If the vendor is international, it's going to be a completely different form. It's going to be a W-8 BEN, which is only valid if the person is not a U.S. citizen, and it really is only for international contractors. Most of the time, there's no other reporting requirement unless that vendor works inside of the United States. I live on a border state with Canada. So sometimes we'll have, some of their coaches, they'll do a retreat in the US, and they'll have Canadians come down and work at those. That's a completely different topic, but there would be a reporting requirement primarily only in that instance. There's a lot of things that go into deciding who gets a 1042, and but collect the W-8 BEN. And if you need any help with that, just let me know. You can always reach out to me on Facebook. I'll be posting the slides to this in the Facebook group, and when this is up on YouTube, hopefully we'll have the slides uploaded then too. Yes, Diamond, we do agree that 1099s are the worst. There's no reason to send them except for to tattle on the people that you do business with. And then this is my contact. If you want to get a hold of me, there's my email address, the phone number, the the link to Calendly. And if you want to buy any of my courses, they're on doddconsultingllc.com. Yeah, January is terrible because not only do you have to do your regular bookkeeping and accounting work, you've got to get all the W-2s out to all of the employees. You've got to get 1099s out to everybody who needs to get them. And I did bookkeeping. I was like, January is the month that is 3 months worth of work, all condensed into one with holidays. Yeah. And Wendy, I agree. 1099s are just becoming so confusing. I thought it was bad, 14 years ago or 15 years ago when I started my firm. But man, what I wouldn't wish to go back to those days where it was so much simpler just to know what went on a 1099, because there wasn't a 1099-K back then because a lot of people didn't accept credit cards. So what I think, if I remember my history correctly, 1099-Ks came about in 2012. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm sure somebody will send me a message and correct me. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, then I will end this. So thank you all for attending. I really appreciate everybody being here. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.